Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are diving into something pretty familiar for our listeners' relationships.
Always relevant.
Oh, yeah. But we're adding a twist today.
Okay.
We're going to be looking at relationships from a Christian perspective.
Okay.
And to guide us in this deep dive, we'll be using this book, The Exemplary Husband, by Stuart Scott.
I love this book.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
Now, don't let the title throw you off.
Right.
This isn't just a manual for married folks.
Nope.
This book really tackles some profound questions about how we view God ourselves and how that impacts how we relate to other people.
Yeah, it really gets at the heart of how our worldview shapes our relationship.
Exactly. So whether you were married, single dating, or just, trying to figure out this whole relationship thing, I think there are some real gems of wisdom in here for everyone.
Absolutely. It challenges a lot of our assumptions and gives us a fresh way to think about building really solid and fulfilling relationships.
Okay, so let's jump right in.
Let's do it.
One of the things that stood out to me right away was how the book addresses these kind of harmful misconceptions about God.
Okay.
That image we sometimes have of God as this angry judge just waiting for us to mess up.
Right. Like he's always watching us, waiting to punish us.
Exactly. And it's like we're constantly walking on eggshells, afraid to make a mistake.
Yeah. And that fear can really seep into our relationships too.
It totally can.
Yeah.
But Scott presents a totally different picture. He emphasizes God as this loving shepherd
Okay.
who is actively involved in our lives, actually cares for us, wants the best for us.
I love that analogy because it paints such a different picture than that harsh judge we were talking about.
It does. And what's fascinating is how our view of God actually impacts how we relate to other people.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it. If you see God as demanding and judgmental, you're probably going to be more critical and unforgiving in your relationships.
Yeah, it's like we project that image onto others.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if we experience God's grace and compassion and see him as this loving shepherd, then we're more likely to extend that same grace to the people around us.
That's a really powerful connection.
Isn't it?
Makes you realize how important it is to have a right understanding of who God is.
100%. And that leads us to the next big question.
Okay.
Who are we in this whole relationship equation?
Right. Because it's not just about God, it's about us too.
Exactly. And the exemplary husband really digs into this idea that we're created in God's image.
Which is mind-blowing when you think about it. We're made in the image of the creator of the universe.
That's huge. It means we have incredible value and a purpose. We're not just some cosmic accident.
Right. We were intentionally designed with unique gifts and abilities.
And that gives us a foundation for understanding not only ourselves, but also our relationships.
Okay. So we've got this incredible value because we're made in God's image.
Right.
But let's be real. The book doesn't sugarcoat things. It acknowledges the reality of sin and how that messes us up.
Yeah, sin is like that glitch in the system. It distorts our view of ourselves and throws our relationships out of whack.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think it's brave of the author to address that head on because you can't fix what you don't acknowledge.
Exactly. Facing that reality of sin is the first step towards healing and growth, both individually and in our relationships.
Okay, so we've talked about God. We've talked about ourselves.
Right.
Now let's get to the main event. Marriage.
It's in the title after all.
Exactly. But what I thought was really interesting was how Scott challenges the idea of marriage being outdated or irrelevant.
Which a lot of people think these days.
They do.
Yeah.
But he actually calls marriage our primary human relationship.
Which is a pretty bold statement in a culture that prioritizes individualism.
It is. But he presents this beautiful picture of two lives becoming one, supporting each other, strengthening each other.
Yeah, he talks about mutual submission and unity, which can sound kind of scary to some people.
Yeah, especially in our me-first world.
Yeah.
But Scott emphasizes that true unity doesn't mean losing yourself.
It's about finding strength and fulfillment in something bigger than yourself.
It's about belonging.
Exactly. And that sense of belonging can be incredibly powerful.
And that brings us to the big L word, love. I think we all have certain ideas about love shaped by, movies, music, our own experiences.
Or who hasn't been influenced by a good rom-com?
But The Exemplary Husband untacks how those societal definitions of love often clash with biblical love.
Yeah, the world often portrays love as this intense feeling, this whirlwind of emotions.
Right, like it's all about butterflies and grand gestures.
But biblical love is more than just a feeling. It's a choice. It's a commitment. It's something we do, not just something we feel.
It makes you wonder how much of the love we see around us is actually just infatuation or even selfishness disguised as something else.
That's a good question to ask ourselves.
Yeah.
Because true love requires effort, sacrifice, putting someone else's needs before your own.
And that's where it gets right. It's not always easy or glamorous.
Definitely not. But in that selflessness, that's where love becomes truly powerful and transformative.
And speaking of transformative, that's where this next concept comes in. And it's one I honestly wasn't expecting.
Scott talks about idolatry.
Idolatry?
Yeah. Now, at first, I didn't connect it to relationships, but
I can see where you're going with this.
it might seem like a stretch, but it's actually pretty profound.
Go on.
Okay, so we know idolatry is putting anything above God in our lives.
Right.
But Scott argues that we can actually turn our relationships into idols.
So you're saying we can idolize another person?
Exactly. When we make a relationship the center of our universe, when we expect it to fulfill needs that only God can meet, that's when it becomes an idol.
And that makes sense, because we start putting so much pressure on that person to make us happy, to complete us.
And when they inevitably fall short because no human being can be our everything,
Right.
we end up disappointed, resentful, maybe even bitter.
It's a recipe for disaster.
It really is. So the key takeaway here is to keep our priorities in check.
Love God first, and then love others freely without expecting them to be our everything. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground already. Got ourselves marriage, the true meaning of love, even idolatry.
True. It's been a whirlwind.
What's next on this relationship roller coaster?
Well, buckle up, because next we're diving into the world of communication.
Oh boy, that's a big one.
It is, and it's crucial for any healthy relationship.
Let's do it.
So we're talking communication.
Your cornerstone of any good relationship,
It's
right?
absolutely. And the Exemplary Husband really dives deep on this.
Deeper than just talking a bit.
Oh yeah, way deeper.
Yeah.
It goes beyond just the words we say.
Okay, so what else is there?
Well, think about it. It's our tone, our body language, how well we listen, even the intent behind our words.
It's like a whole symphony of communication happening.
It really is. And we need to learn how to play all the instruments, you know.
To become fluent in the language of relationships.
Exactly. And just like learning any language, it takes practice, intentionality, a willingness to grow.
Okay, so it's not just about the words.
No, not at all. Scott emphasizes that communication is a skill.
Something we need to work on.
Exactly. The book offers some really practical guidance on how to speak truthfully and kindly and purposefully. One thing that really stood out to me was the idea of pausing before you speak.
Oh man, that's a hard one. Especially in the heat of the moment.
It is, but it's so valuable.
Yeah.
So often we react impulsively and say things we regret later.
I'm definitely guilty of that.
Me too. But if we can take a moment to breathe, to consider the other person's perspective,
Yeah.
to choose our words carefully, it can make a world of difference.
Easier said than done, but definitely something to strive for.
Absolutely. It takes practice and a healthy dose of humility.
So much humility. Okay, so we've explored how we view God, ourselves,
Average?
marriage, the true meaning of love, the danger of idolatry, and now communication.
Quite the journey so far.
It has been. But wait, there's more.
Oh yeah. We're just getting started.
Hit me with it. What else is there to uncover in this relationship goldmine?
Next, we're going to explore the concept of leadership.
Leadership, okay. Now that sounds interesting, especially in the context of relationships.
It is. It's a topic that often gets misunderstood and misapplied.
I'm only yours. What does the exemplary husband have to say about leadership?
So when you hear the word leadership, what pops into your head?
Honestly, I think a lot of us picture someone in charge, calling the shots, maybe even a little bossy.
That's the classic command and control model, right? But Scott flips that on its head and introduces this radically different image of leadership. The shepherd.
The shepherd. Now, that's interesting. I wouldn't normally associate those two things.
Most people don't. But think about it. A shepherd is gentle, guiding, protecting. Not exactly what we think of when we picture a CEO or a politician.
Not at all. It's a much softer image.
Exactly. And that's precisely Scott's point. True leadership, the kind that reflects Christ's love for the church.
Okay.
It's not about lording it over others. It's about serving, nurturing, empowering.
So less about barking orders and more about leading by example.
Exactly. It's about having a servant's heart, putting the needs of others before your own. And this applies not just to husbands, but to anyone in a position of influence.
So parents, teachers, bosses, community leaders, anyone who's guiding or influencing others.
Precisely. It's about impacting others in a positive way.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So how does one become a good shepherd leader? What does that actually look like in practice?
That's a great question. Scott outlines some key characteristics.
Lay it on me. I'm taking notes.
All right, first, a shepherd knows his sheep. He spends time with them, observes their needs, understands their strengths and weaknesses.
It's like that saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Exactly. It's about building trust and rapport, creating a safe space where people feel seen and valued.
And not judged or condemned.
Right. Which leads us to the second point. A shepherd protects his sheep. He's vigilant, watchful, always on guard against threats.
So not controlling, but responsible. Looking out for the well-being of those under his care.
Yes. Being a source of strength and security, someone people can rely on when things get tough.
Like a safe haven.
Exactly. And thirdly, a shepherd guides his sheep, not by force, but by gently leading them towards greener pastures.
Helping them grow and thrive.
Yes. Providing direction, offering wisdom, but also allowing space for freedom and making their own choices.
So it's a balance of guidance and freedom?
Precisely. It's about empowering others. Now, all this might sound a little idealistic.
Well, this sounds pretty amazing.
It is, but Scott gets really practical about how husbands can specifically lead their wives in this way.
Okay, give us the goods. What are some tangible things husbands can do?
Well, one tip is to prioritize regular communication. Not just about logistics and to-dos, but about dreams, fears, hopes.
The deeper stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about really listening, trying to understand your wife's perspective.
Making her feel heard, not just waiting for your turn to speak.
Exactly. Another key point is to be proactive in serving your wife. Not waiting for her to ask for help, but looking for ways to lighten her load.
Anticipating her needs.
Yeah.
Being thoughtful.
Yes. It's showing love through actions. And finally, being willing to make sacrifices. Putting her needs before your own, even when it's inconvenient.
Choosing to be less selfish, more focused on the other person.
In a nutshell, yes. And this is where the concept of stewardship comes in. The idea that everything we have, time, talents, resources, ultimately belongs to God.
So it's not just about being a good husband, but a good steward of everything God has given us.
Exactly. And that includes our relationships. We're called to manage them wisely and nurture them, use them for God's glory and for the good of others.
Not possessing or controlling our spouse, but cherishing and honoring them as a precious gift from God.
Beautifully said. And that brings us to the final and perhaps most challenging section of the book. This is where Scott gets real about those danger zones that can wreck even the strongest relationships.
Oh, danger zones. Okay. I'm a little nervous, but also intrigued. Lay it on me. What are these relationship landmines we need to watch out for?
Scott focuses on 3 struggles. Many husbands face anger, fear, and lust.
Wow, that's a powerful trio. And I think most of us can relate to those emotions in some way. But how do they specifically play out in our relationships?
Well, let's start with anger. Scott points out that anger is often rooted in unmet expectations. When things don't go our way, when people don't meet our needs, we lash out, become critical, demanding, even abusive.
It's like that saying, hurt people hurt people. We take our frustrations out on the ones closest to us.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to figure out the root of our anger. What are those expectations or desires driving our reactions? Are they realistic? Are they aligned with God's will?
So taking a step back and asking ourselves, why am I so angry?
Precisely. Then there's fear. Fear can manifest in so many ways. From anxiety and worry to insecurity and jealousy, it can make us withdraw emotionally, become controlling, even sabotage our relationships.
It's like that saying, fear's a liar. It distorts our perceptions and makes us believe things that aren't true.
Exactly. And when we let fear call the shots, we can end up pushing away the people we love the most.
So how do we fight back against fear? How do we stop it from controlling us?
Scott emphasizes replacing fear with faith. Trusting God, believing his promises, and focusing on what we can control, not what we can't.
So surrendering our anxieties to God and being present in the moment.
Exactly. And then there's lust, which is a whole other conversation.
Yeah, that's a loaded word.
Lust is more than just sexual desire. It's objectifying others, seeing them as a means to an end.
Reducing people to their physical attributes or what they can do for us.
Precisely. And lust can manifest in many ways, from pornography and infidelity to emotional affairs and inappropriate flirting.
It's a slippery slope. It starts small and can escalate quickly.
Exactly. That's why it's crucial to guard our hearts and minds, to be aware of what we're taking in through media, entertainment, even social interactions.
Setting boundaries, being accountable to others, and seeking God's help to overcome temptation.
Precisely. Now, I know all of this might sound heavy.
It is a lot to take in.
It is. But Scott doesn't just leave us with a list of problems. He offers practical guidance on overcoming these struggles, finding healing and restoration.
So there's hope. Even if we've messed up, succumbed to anger, fear, or lust, there's still a way back.
Absolutely. It starts with repentance, acknowledging our sin and asking for God's forgiveness, then making a conscious effort to change our thinking and behavior, replacing destructive patterns with healthy ones.
It's like putting on that spiritual armor Paul talks about in Ephesians, standing firm against the enemy's attacks.
Exactly. It's a daily battle.
Yeah.
But we don't have to fight alone. We have God's power working within us, and we have the support of other believers.
So we've covered a lot of ground today, exploring God's love, our identity in Him, what it means to love sacrificially, and even those danger zones that can threaten our relationships.
Yeah.
But there's still more to unpack.
Lots to think about.
It is. You know, as we've been talking about all of this,
Yeah.
one thing that's really stuck with me is this idea that ultimately all of our actions should be rooted in love.
Love.
Whether we're interacting with our spouse, our kids, our coworkers,
Right.
our neighbors, our enemies,
Yeah.
it all comes back to love.
It's like that filter we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Seeing everything through the lens of love.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's not just about, like, you know, those warm, fuzzy feelings.
No.
It's about actively choosing to act in a loving way.
Making that choice.
Yeah. Even when it's hard. Even when we don't feel like it.
Right. Because true love is a verb.
It is.
It's something we do.
Yes.
Not just something we feel.
And that's what I think really sets biblical love apart from all those fleeting emotions that we see portrayed in our culture so much.
Right. It's not based on circumstances or feelings.
It's a commitment.
Exactly. It's a decision to put someone else's needs before our own.
To go the extra aisle.
To seek their good. To extend grace and forgiveness even when they don't deserve it.
Which is really hard sometimes.
It is. But it's also incredibly freeing, you know?
How so?
Well, because when we're rooted in love, we don't need to control others or manipulate them or try to prove ourselves.
Like we could just be.
We can just be. We can focus on being the best version of ourselves and reflecting God's love to the world around us.
And I think that's what makes The Exemplary Husband so much more than just a book about marriage.
I agree.
It's a guide for living a life grounded in love.
A blueprint for better relationships.
Exactly. Relationships that honor God and bless others.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive today, I want to leave our listeners with this thought.
Okay.
What does love require of you today?
That's a great question. In your marriage, in your friendships, in your family,
In your workplace.
in your community, how can you choose to love others in a tangible, practical way?
Maybe it's just offering a listening ear to a friend who's struggling.
Or extending forgiveness to someone who's hurt you.
Maybe it's choosing to speak words of encouragement instead of criticism.
Or sacrificing your own comfort for the well-being of your spouse.
Or prioritizing quality time with your kids.
Or simply smiling at a stranger.
You know it can be big or small.
Exactly.
Whatever it looks like in your life,
Yeah.
I encourage you to embrace this call to love.
Let love be your guide.
Let it be the filter through which you make decisions.
Big and small.
Let it shape the way you interact with everyone you meet.
Because when we choose love, we choose joy, peace, hope.
Not just for ourselves,
but for the world around us.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into The Exemplary Husband.
It's been a pleasure.
I hope you've gained some valuable insights and maybe even a few aha moments along the way.
Keep exploring, keep learning, and most importantly, keep loving.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.